All right, hello, sports fans. Today is December 9th, 2021. You are in the 411 Sports World show. This edition is a special edition, and it's the history of the game. And so we're going to, there's a lot of back and forth talking about, who's the greatest of all time. And in the sport that we're talking about here is basketball. And so there's a lot of debate, a lot of back and forth on that. And for me, I think that it's very difficult to determine that. You can always have your opinion. But what I believe is also lost is the appreciation for the players of yesteryear. And yesteryear dates many decades back now. And it seems like a lot of time we have discussions, it always starts with 1980. And by the way, 1980 is a long time ago as well. But there's a whole lot of players that have played this game, and we're going to talk about some of those. And I had to think about who to bring on for this, and I was like, wow, I know the perfect person for this to give us a great perspective on things. And his name is Mr. Henry Brown. So I welcome Henry Brown to the show. How are you doing, Mr. Brown?
Thank you, and I'm doing extremely well for a cold Georgia day.
Oh man, it is freezing. You
I,
know.
I and it's relative because I was talking to my sister in Michigan, and she told me that's T-shirt weather here. So I told her, well, unfortunately, I don't live in Michigan anymore.
Absolutely, and we'll get into that too because Michigan is a hotbed there for basketball. And I know you're going to get into that a little bit, but before we get rolling, uh, Mr. Brown, tell everyone a little bit about yourself. Um, and I know there's one hidden, unknown fact that a lot of people may not know. I hope you reveal that as well.
Okay, so I guess modesty is the key here. I grew up in the city of Detroit. I played basketball all over the city. I was high school track and field. You guys would call them phenoms. I long jump 23.11, ran 13.5 in the high hurdles. Went on to college, joined the Air Force, played for the Air Force team, played some professional basketball in Europe. Uh, Retired here to Warner Robins, Georgia, after 30 years in the Air Force, and I am now the executive vice president of Local 987, American Federation of Government Employees. And I am an avowed basketball fan. I love the game. I watch. My right now, my passion is the WNBA because they play a great fundamental game. We've gotten away from that in terms of basketball, but still, I watch everything: college, professional, and my passion is the WNBA.
All right, okay. And were you ever did you ever have an opportunity to play for an NBA team?
I played against NBA players. Never had an opportunity to play. I played against Austin Carr. You know, you try to make the rounds and think you're good enough to join the NBA, and I've seen some players that I played against, but it's about systems, what fit you. And back in the day, you have to remember the NBA was trying to brand themselves. So what they were looking for were people who garnered headlines in college, and that guaranteed a certain segment of people when they went to play in those arenas, or people wanted to see if you were great in college. You that was It was almost a given that you would be great in the pros, but in a lot of instances, that never came to fruition for some of those guys. One of the guys I remember was Austin Carr, who played for Notre Dame. Great shooter, but he was a poor ball handler.
Oh wow.
Oh,
Okay.
I got to tell you that I did play with the Iceman,
Okay.
uh, and that was an adventure. Uh, George went to the school called Martin Luther King in Detroit, and believe it or not, George was not the best basketball player in his family. He had a brother named Booker Gervin. Booker was probably head and shoulders above George in terms of ability, talent, but he wasn't one of these guys that was going to pursue basketball. He was a playground legend. So if you had the chance, it used to be 25 cents or 50 cents a head to play. and I always came home with $2 in my pocket when I had an opportunity to play on this team. And believe it or not, that was lunch money. So those were the
Wow.
days.
Okay. All right. Well, speaking of the days, I want to talk about some of the players back in the day, way back in the day, and we'll start off with because we're going to concentrate it with the players of the '60s, but we definitely don't want to
Okay.
leave out other times. But one of the mainstays, uh, arguably the best player probably in the '50s era, George Mikan, the big man that played for the Lakers. So, is there anything you can tell us about Mike and his size? How it compared to the players he played against, and just how fundamental was he? How great was he?
George Mikan played for the Minneapolis Lakers. So he played for the team before they moved to LA. Uh, the only thing I recall of George Mikan is what I've read. I never had an opportunity to see him play.
Hmm.
I'm a '60s kind of guy, and but if you're a fan of the sport, then you would have to, delve back into the history to watch its evolution or read up on the evolution. But George was the first big man who was fundamentally sound. Uh, People typically thought he was too big for the game, and it was an unfair advantage that he created for his team because he was so big and no one could guard him. So uh, George Mikan was a forerunner to some of your great centers of today, and certainly he has his place in the pantheon of greatness of the NBA.
All right, and also there's a famous drill named after him, the George Mikan drill, that players even today use, where you lay the ball up, catch it, lay it up, other hand, lay it up. There's that drill.
Around the rim. Yes,
Yes, around the
yes,
rim.
yes. Uh,
Okay.
Legacies are born for. I think what today. We have these conversations. My son and I, nephews, whenever we get together, and I come from a large basketball family. I have guys that coach high school basketball, that are assistants on college teams. So there's always this conversation about the greatest. And I tell them it's relative to your eyes. What have you seen? And most people don't want to go back and do the homework and look at old film or look at old video clips of people. And then they'll tell you, oh, he's a stiff or he's this. But I tell people the thing you have to be mindful of is one word. It's called evolution. Evolution of the game. The game has evolved into a year-round game where you're working out. They have these gyms. They talk about eating. A lot of that wasn't available in the '60s and '70s. So what we did was we've evolved from players having to sell uh, uh, cars or work in dealerships during the off season because they weren't paid a great deal of money. And so you didn't have a chance to work out like these guys do. You didn't have your own nutritionist. You didn't have gyms in your house. You didn't have players that would play all over the world together, or should I say, all over the country, because you have Kobe who turned up in New York, Rutgers Park, to play. You had Shaq to go to L.A. and play. You have players today that play in the NBA find themselves playing at UCLA. So it's a year-round sport where you work on your craft uh, 365 days. But these players from bygone years never had that opportunity.
Yes. All right. That's very valuable, and that's definitely something we need to look at when we have these discussions, and put that into perspective. But we'll go ahead and move into the '60s, the era of the '60s, and
Mm.
this is it's been well documented. This was a great era. I mean, some of the players that we still even we talk about today. So I like for you to just pick any players out of that era, and we can have our discussion.
Okay. In the '60s, so being a wow, when I think about that. I saw my first professional basketball game in '65, I think it was, and it was the Pistons against the Milwaukee Bucks. And I remember we had a guy by the name of Howie Comives. We had Dave DeBuscher. Let's see. And right now, that's what I recall. But I went to my first game, and I was sitting in the nosebleed section. So I was thinking, man, these guys are small, relativity. You know what I'm saying? I'm sitting up here. But then as the game was winding down, we walked down to the floor and stood next to these guys and went, whoa, these are some big guys. So this is the 60s. You had the Jerry Lucases, who was, and this is a team, the Cincinnati Royals, that drafted him. You had Oscar Robinson. You had Hal Greer, Bailey Howell, who played for the Boston Celtics. You had, of course, the GOAT by any standard was Bill Russell. I mean, today, what do we say? How many ships do you have before you can be considered the greatest? So if we use championship to measure greatness, no doubt it's Bill Russell. But I always like to measure greatness by rule change. So they have to change the rules to level the playing field for everyone else to be competitive with you. And there's only two players in the history of the game that had the rules change, so that so that it would allow other players to be competitive with them. And so, who might that be? It was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They stopped the
Mm-hmm.
dunk, said you could no longer dunk, and then Wilt Chamberlain. So the lane has gone to what, 12 feet now? When I think
Oh,
it
it
was
wide.
6 or 7. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They widened the lane. Then it
Mm-hmm.
used to be the rule. Now you can't leave the free throw line until the ball hits the rim.
Right.
So Wilt used to just throw it up there and then go get it and dunk it on them. So it's like, hey, we can't do that because there's nobody else that can compete with him on the boards. 3 seconds was a byproduct of Wilt because he used to just go stand in the lane. They throw the ball into him and he dunk it on you. So I think that what we have to always be mindful of is what changed to make the game evolve, and how did what individuals were responsible for those changes. And perhaps the absolute greatest player in the history of the NBA, and bar none, no championships, is absolutely Wilt Chamberlain, because people today are still pursuing some of the records he established.
Okay, I need you to say that. I need you to say that one more time.
Okay. Bar none, hands down, the greatest basketball player in the history of the NBA is Wilt Chamberlain, because of the number of rules that they changed to make the game competitive for other people. Uh, I think he had 10, in excess of 31 points, 20 rebounds, 10 assists, 10 block shots. Think about that. Now, you know the closest player to him in that statistical category have 4.
Wow.
So in terms of things done, scoring 100 points, averaging 50 points a season, leading the NBA in assists, leading the NBA in rebounds, leading the NBA in block shots. Every statistical category at one point in time, he was the leader of that. People would say to him, well, you can't score. So he averaged 50 points a game. Well, you don't know how to pass the ball. So he lead the NBA in assists. Well, you're just a big guy. You can't rebound. So he lead the NBA in rebound. Oh, well, you're just this big guy who can't block shots. So he lead the NBA in block shots. So dare I say that he was the type of guy you couldn't tell him what he couldn't do, because the moment you did that, everybody else in the league suffered because that's what he would do.
Wow. Now, what will one say about this and say, well, okay, well, Wilkes did this, but he did it against, no competition. He was the only big guy that played. Like these are things that you hear from time to time. Not saying that that's the truth, that's
No,
accurate or not, but so you're here to kind of put that to rest. So
okay,
what was the type of players he played against, their size, their strength, and then also get into the Wilkes actual attributes as well.
okay. So here's how I want to put this in perspective. All right, you go back to Wilt's era. You had maybe 12, 13 teams that comprised the NBA at that time. Let's say 20. All right, you have
Actually it
20
was less than
players
that.
that
You was about
comprise.
right.
Okay, yeah, but let's just say for the sake of argument, we'll give them 20, so it's a bigger random sampling of numbers. So here's my question to you: how many in the '60s? How many different universities were there in the United States of America?
Mm,
Thousands, correct?
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
accurate.
And how many basketball teams were there? Thousands. How many people played? Thousands. So now you're talking about, of all those guys that are universities that are playing basketball, all American, we only have room for, there's 20 teams, 12 players per team. You're not going to supplant anybody. So the rookies, they only took one or two rookies a year, if that, per team. So when you talk about uh, competitiveness, you still have the same number of colleges, you have more teams. So what does that equate to? The talent being watered down, because you've gone from, let's say, 20 teams. What do we have? 30 teams in the NBA. Just about every city have a team.
Yeah, it's a lot of teams in the
So
league.
right. So the number of colleges out there hasn't diminished, have they? So now you have what, arguably, the pool has gotten bigger that you can select from, but also the number of teams mean that you can put more players into the NBA from the different college teams. Look at it like this: how many times you see a guy come to the NBA and in 2 or 3 years he's gone? He was All American. He was a great college basketball player, and in 2 or 3 years he's gone. Now what do? We have a D League. You didn't have a D League back then. So now you have a farm system for the WNBA, I mean for the NBA. So now it's more players. So the talent was great back then. You only need to sit down and look at some of the statistical categories. Uh, here's something that people don't realize about Wilt Chamberlain. He's also a world-class high jumper and quarter miler. He was not just he was a world-class volleyball player. The guy was an athlete, and you can't quantify being a great athlete by relegating yourself to one sport like we do today. Uh, I don't know how people can talk about the talent pool back in the day. You think about Earl Monroe, Clyde Frazier, Jerry Lucas, Oscar Robertson. Think about the records that they're chasing today that those guys established back then, but there weren't a lot of talent.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so when people say, "Well, Wilt, didn't go against anybody that was, they all were 6'6", is that
Not
accurate,
true.
or can you
No,
go into
that's
more
not true.
detail on that?
All right. So we're talking about big man. Bill Russell was a big man. The most feared big man in the NBA at that time, feared by everybody, was a 6'9" center. His name was Wes Unseld. Uh, He was an immovable force. He was 6'9", and take some time and read up on some of these guys. You'll see. Nobody wanted to play against Wes Unseld because he was called uh, one shot master. If you miss it, you got back. What was one of the greatest attributes of Wes Unseld during his playing career?
The
The
outlet
outlet
pass.
pass. Hey, see what I'm saying? So you couldn't sink down in the paint to help out because once he got the rebound, he could take and throw the ball from one end to the other and perfectly hit you in stride for a layup. So people just didn't gangbuster him on the rim. They respected his ability to rebound. Bill Russell accolades speak for themselves. Then you had Walt Bellamy, who played for Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
You had Al Attles, who played for Golden State Warriors that won a championship. Uh, so when you say that there are no big people in the league that Wilt Chamberlain played against, there were great centers. Willis Reed.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
he played at
I'm
Grambling,
just
by the
saying.
way.
So yes, absolutely. So what I'm saying is that you can't allow your biases or your vision to determine what greatness is. Because most of you grew up on Michael Jordan and his shoes, and you still buy his shoes. Uh, Will Chamberlain played in the old Converse All Stars. Everybody had them, you know. Uh, you and I were talking last week, and when we was talking about this, and we was talking about Cardwell Jones, who graduated from Albany State.
Right.
It was Cardwell. What was his brother's name? There was two brothers. They played in the NBA simultaneously, and his daughter was in some sort of dance recital or something here in Warner Robins. So he used to always come to this golf course and hit balls, but he was always over in the corner. Didn't want anybody bothering him. So one day he was over there, and I took it upon myself to go introduce myself to him. And from that day on, every time he come to the course, we'd have these conversations. And so one day I happened to ask him, I said, what made Wilt Chamberlain the greatest player in the NBA? You know what he said?
Okay, I'm ready for this one.
His intelligence and his ability to take players and put them in a place in life to where they could be successful after they finish playing. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, if you played with Wilt, he taught you about money. He taught you about being on time. He taught you about being productive on the floor. He talked to you about how to intimidate people. He said Wilt gave you the whole gambit. He said the best time to talk to Wilt was after practice, where he would sit on the bench and hold court. And he said when he held court, you walked away with a newfound respect for him because people used to call him Goliath, but they never talked about his academic acumen or how smart he was. It's always he's a big guy, but the guy was brilliant.
And wow, so what's an example of what he talked about as far as like off the court, what to do after your playing career, or building up to
Investments,
towards the end of your career?
yeah. One of the big things he talked about being able to manage your money. So you know what we have today? You have agents managing your money. You have never heard of anybody managing Wilt Chamberlain's money. He owned clubs. He owned a palatial house out in Beverly Hills. The, he was just smart. He negotiated all his own contracts. Uh, and he said one of the things that he conveyed to me and how, he would know the salary of everybody on the team. He said, if I take this much, then we'll have to cut him and perhaps take some money. He said, I don't need that much. He says, you give me this and make sure it's equally spread out amongst the players on our team so we can keep one another together. So you got to think about that. Who does that? Where does that happen today?
Uh, LeBron did it, right?
I'm not so sure about that. LeBron is being paid a healthy fee. And you know something else that we don't take into account: endorsements. Uh, Jordan has built a $1 billion brand off of sneakers. $1 billion. You got to think about that. $1 billion. I think, and I know we're live, so somebody say, "Oh, that guy don't know what you're talking about." I think he's crossing into the trillions now. You know, Michael Jordan owns one of the premier luxury yachts in the world. Premier luxury yachts in the world. Uh, Owns an NBA team. He's not co-owner. He doesn't have three or four guys together. He owns the team. So you can't own a team being a millionaire because the players that play for you are millionaires.
No,
So
very good point.
yeah,
Okay. Well, let's spin it back to Wilt and
okay,
and let's talk about some of the early Wilt, because what a lot of people do go back to recall because of video is more so towards the end of his career, where he was more of a
mm-hmm.
kind of a plotter later in his career. But his early days, talk about how, because you did say he was a world class track athlete, as far as high
Yeah.
jumping and a quarter mile. So that means he had to have some sort of speed. So, I mean, how fast was he early on, and how athletic was he at the younger
Okay.
version of Wilt in the NBA?
So think about this: the world record in the 400 meters is 44 something seconds or 44 something, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree.
Okay. So let's look at 44. Look at the tracks, look at the training, look at the facilities, right? I think Wilt ran a 49-second quarter.
Wow, he's
Now,
moving.
this is in the 50s when he was at Kansas. People called him a moper because he didn't win the national championship. They had everything to say about the guy, but as I said initially, no one talks about his intelligence. So, what kind of player was Wilt Chamberlain?
Mm-hmm.
People viewed him as somewhat of a villain.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wanted to root for Bill Russell, but the story that's being told is that how great of friends they were. But because they were trying to build a league on the floor, they would act as if though they had no love for one another. One of the best stories told, and I think if you go on YouTube, you'll find it, was Boston Celtics was playing in Philadelphia, and Bill Russell came to Chamberlain's house where his mother fixed the meal for players, and Bill Russell went up and got in Chamberlain's bed and went to bed and slept. Then they woke him up in time for him to go to the game, and his mother tells Bill Russell, "You better take it easy on my baby tonight because I fed you well today." You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Anecdotally, you don't have to be an enemy to play against one another and have respect and dignity. So what Wilt could do is he could get the rebound, hit you with the outlet, and outrun everybody to get down and dunk on you. They said he couldn't shoot, but he had a fadeaway bank shot that
Mm-hmm.
was murderous. Uh, he shot in the high 40s from the field. And people say, well, that's simply because he dunked. No, he had a bank shot on both sides of the rim. He could pass the ball from either side of the post. Postmen today are more of 3-point shooters. They want to lollygag out by the three. It's what do they call it today? Tyrone analytics.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you if you take this many threes while he take that many twos, you stand a chance of winning the game. And I still that doesn't equate to a win because if I can get you down in the paint, score two, and then go to the free throw line and get the same three you got out there 40 feet away, I'm gonna have your best player on the bench. Would you not agree?
Oh yeah, yeah.
He got to go to the bench. But we have abandoned the post-up game or the paint, and people have fallen in love with the three. Now, don't get me wrong. I like the three, but I like to see people bang in the paint. I love that.
Yeah. A lot of what I see with the bigs, in the more current era, you can even say the last 15 to 18 years, is the big has evolved into a position where um, they're rim runners, to catch the alley off the pick and roll, or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they're stretch where they kind of just get out the way and stand in the corner, and if they can shoot it from distance, then they shoot. Like the center commanding the paint, those days are long gone. And very few and far in between where you find that. You might find it in an Embiid, he comes to mind, and maybe one other big, but that's about it.
I think Embiid loiters out in the paint too much. I would
Yes,
share this with you. So if you are a student of the game and you like basketball and you watched the NBA championship last season and you ask yourself, when did Milwaukee turn that series around? When Giannis went to the paint
yep,
because he was on the free throw line and he had these guys in foul trouble. When Giannis went to the paint, and go back and watch it. When he went to the paint, the whole series turned. But when he was trying to drive to the hoop, jumping over people, getting in foul trouble, he marginalized his ability to dominate because you can't dominate from the bench.
right.
But you wanted me to go back and specifically hang on Wilton Norman Chamberlain. So here's my question to you, Turner. You're an official, you've coached. Obviously, you've seen a lot of basketball. And I know this is your show, so I shouldn't be asking you a question. I should be responding to you. But uh, allow the old elderly statesman to ask you a question.
Yeah, respect.
Okay. So if you're building a team, building, what would be the most important thing that you would look for in a player?
Wow. Well, I want the player. In my opinion, I want a player that's going to dominate. He's going to
Ah,
dominate.
you took the words right out. You see, you answered the question. You
Yeah, I
want a
did, didn't
dominant player, right?
I? Right, dominate. Yeah,
So did Wilt Chamberlain dominate?
he sure did. He sure did. Based on what I read and viewed
Okay.
on videos, he definitely
So
was a
so
dominating
Michael
force.
Jordan, Michael, people tell you Michael Jordan was a dominant player. I submit to you that Michael Jordan did what? He evolved. You want me to tell you why he evolved? Who should give Michael Jordan the blues?
Detroit.
Joe Dumars specifically.
Okay.
He never, if you go back and look at it, he never got help. Probably 75% of the time it was one-on-one he guarded Michael Jordan. But Michael Jordan also knew not to go to the hoop. So who was the dominant player? Psychologically, it was Dumars because if you beat him, you know they're going to beat you up if you go in the paint. So what do people do? Pull up. So that's why I say it's the faint of heart. If you're going to go to the hoop, go hard and take what they give you and get to the free throw line. But you can't quit. Do you know anyone else in the history of this game or this league that has scored 100 points?
Will Chamberlain.
So how do you
That's it.
marginalize that?
Oh,
Exactly. That's the point I'm making. You keep hollering GOAT. People telling me, I'm like, you don't understand. To be the greatest, you have had to have one heck of an impact on the game. Michael Jordan has had financial impact. And then not only that, he became the face of the league And he was allowed to get away with stuff that, remember the championship game he won up in Utah? Tell me that wasn't a foul.
I plead the fifth on that one.
Yeah, that's what I like. And that's exactly what I like. We can look at things, but you can't say where the gray matter rests that, ooh, that was a foul. But because we like someone, oh yeah, the official's not going to bail you out on that call, and your official in the closing minutes of the game. The rules are the rules.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care whether it's the beginning of the game, the end of the game. If there's an infraction created, then you get called for it. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no in between. It's a black and white game.
It definitely appeared that Byron Russell was assisted, a
Yeah.
little bit out there on that play
And
before
you know what I
Georgia's last
like
shot.
about you know what I like about you? He was assisted. You didn't say he was fouled. Now you didn't. You took off your black and white shirt tonight to say, "Oh, he was assisted." But if he was in that game, he'd have got the whistle, and I know that. Mm.
Yes, sir.
I love talking to you. I sometimes I get this. I'm telling you, I've watched so much basketball in my life. I've seen great things. I remember the time that when I first saw Louis Alcindor play, and I'd never met anybody over 7 feet in my life. And when I went and stood up next to him, and I looked up at him, and I was like 14 or 15. I was like, man, I went home and told my dad, do they make beds that big? You see that question?
Yes,
And
and for those
so,
for those who don't know, Lou Alcindor later
oh, okay.
became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, so
I'm sorry.
changed his
Yeah.
name.
See,
No, you're
see,
right,
see,
but that's
thank
who
you
he
for
was.
cleaning that up. Yeah,
Well,
thanks
no,
for cleaning
that's
that up.
in perspective, that's who he was when you met him at 14, Lou Alcindor,
Yep.
and
Lou
we need to
Alcindor.
understand that. We need to understand that perspective. So yes,
Yeah.
that was Lou Alcindor.
And
Arguably
you
one of the
you know
greatest players to ever play.
ever play. And you know something? Again, let's perspective and evolution. I think he won 4 state championships at Paul Memorial in New York. Went on to win 3 NCAA championships at UCLA, and the reason he couldn't get a fourth was because freshmen couldn't play varsity. Got drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks, won an NBA championship there. And you know who he had on his team? Lucius Allen. They brought in Oscar Robertson. They had this smooth young forward, and I can't. His name escapes me. I'll get it. But he was the featured player, and everybody and his mother took that sky hook, and they couldn't do anything with it. Baseline, and he had a sweet free throw stroke. If you looked at him, so he wasn't a guy you can foul in the waning minutes of a game. He was going to miss a free throw. Again, he worked on his craft, and again, you know what? The next most important thing that any great player has to have in his repertoire
Hmm.
is a
What's
great
that? Go.
coach.
Oh, great coach.
A
Okay.
great coach. Look at all the great young players that have fizzled out in the NBA, and look at the schools they came from. Uh, a lot of people have, and again, you wanted me to focus on Wilt Chamberlain, but the game in and of itself, and the love for the game, and watching coaches. I like Bobby Knight because a lot of things Bobby Knight did never made the newspapers. The things he did, throwing coaches and cussing people out and hitting players, always made the newspaper. But most of you'll never remember Landon Turner, the guy that was paralyzed in a car accident that played for him. He got Red Auerbach to draft that guy,
Wow.
despite him being paralyzed. Then paid for his house so that as a quadriplegic, wheelchair, car, he bought all this. But one of the greatest stories, and this is one you got a lot of people. I am an absolute fan of Isaiah Thomas. And if you're from the Detroit circles, we don't call him Isaiah, we call him the captain. Went to Indiana, and Bobby Knight went to Chicago to recruit him. And if you know anything about the story, he lived in the hood of Chicago,
Correct.
where there was murders, robbers. When he got out the car, his brother Lloyd said, "I was thinking about robbing him until I recognized who he was for my brother." And his mother said to him, "My son will come to your school if you guarantee me he's going to get his degree." And he said, "He'll get a degree." He said, "I have your word." He said, "You have my word." So as a freshman, Isaiah was at a party. And Bobby Knight came to the party and told him, "Hey, you got to go home. You got homework to do." When Isaiah left in his junior year, every summer he went back until he got his degree from Indiana. So people come in the house and recruit these young men, and they're back in our cities. They come back home because no one's invested in them. Like Caldwell Jones said, Will Chamberlain invested in him as a person and a man. He said, "I learned how to be a professional from Will Chamberlain." He said, Chamberlain never turned up to a game without a tie and a sports coat on. Never. He said, every time you saw him, he was well dressed. Philadelphia wanted him to live in Philadelphia, but he lived in New York. So he used to commute back and forth to Philadelphia. But he never missed a practice. He was never late to a practice. And he never missed a game because he was late getting to the airplane and getting on the train to travel from coast to coast. They don't have it they didn't have it like you have it today. Every professional team on their own airplane. So when these guys went out to the West Coast to play, they had to play every team on the West Coast because there was no back and forth. So you would be out there playing the Lakers, the Golden State Warriors, Seattle. I don't know if Seattle had a team, but whatever team they had out on the West Coast, you stayed and played all those teams. Then you came back. And when they came, they would stay and play the New York, Detroit. So they do that round robin, and then they would go back to the West Coast. One of the greatest premier jumpers in the NBA at that time that played with Chamberlain was Elgin Baylor. But when you look at him in comparison to the day of what people do, you go, "Oh, he was a stiff." Yeah, because you're comparing apples to oranges. They're both fruit. They're both good for you. But one serves one purpose, the other serves the other purpose. One is a citrus. It defies logic sometimes how we typically try to compare things. You have to respect the beauty of the game. And when we first started talking, I talked about evolution. Respect the beauty of basketball and its evolution to where we are today, because I'm going to tell you something. Anybody that's listening to Tyrone, I'm going to tell you something. Your grandkids are going to tell you how bad Michael Jordan was one day. He's horrible. He's not as good as X that's playing today because X can do this. X did that. So now what you're going to do is try to defend what? The players of your generation. So I am a 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000 in love with basketball. So you if you pick it up at the 80s, that's your reference point. But if you want to know, ask me. And then we'll sit down like I do with my grandson, look at some of the old players. You go, "Oh man, these, you know what they call them? Gray films. White. This stuff is gray because they black and white."
Now and the uniforms were in color. The world was in color. It's just that what you were viewing at that time, again, going to evolution, the film was black and white. So yeah, the Celtics did. The Celtics did wear. Right, the Celtics did wear green jerseys, green and white jerseys back then. The Lakers wore Actually, Lakers, what, before they wore the gold, Lakers used to wear like a shade of
A
blue,
bluish color. Yeah.
right, bluish color, and then white.
Yep.
And by the way, the Lakers used to play. I read this that the Lakers used to play at the what is it? It used to be where the Clippers used to play at, the sports arena, LA Sports Arena, like before the Clippers became that. But
Oh,
the
oh,
Lakers,
okay. Before.
they played it. Yeah,
No.
they played at the sports arena when they first came to
So
LA.
okay, yes. Then they moved. They built the L.A. Forum,
Then they built the Forum, right?
right? And
So when the
that's when they
Lakers,
migrated. Yeah. When I played for the Air Force team, we were out in California, and we got to go and visit with the Lakers at the Forum. Got autographs and stuff. And I've never been big on autographs. I probably have probably 10 autographs. I've never thought it was important to get somebody's autograph. I have Barry Sanders, Dr. J, was Barry Sanders, Dr. J. I have this guy named Earl McCullough,
hmm
and you probably don't remember Terry Durod that played for the Boston Celtics. I have his. I have Rick Barry. I would have to look, but I have old programs. Oh, I have John Carlos, uh, Jess Green, uh, uh, Tommy Smith. So those to me, those were the type of people that not only changed their sports, but they stood up and were penalized for changing the world. Carlos and Tommy Smith. Uh, so
Well, that's great too. And um, but to finish up and put a bow on the Wilt part of the '60s, one
okay,
would say, well, Wilt Chamberlain doesn't have, 6 championships. He doesn't have, 4 to 6 championships. Since he was so big and so dominant in his era, I mean, how can he be considered the greatest without having those championships? What would you say to that?
they changed the rules to allow you to play against him. He could have probably had 50 championships had they not changed the rules. You know, if they'd have
Right.
kept the lane narrow, you couldn't have beat him. If they didn't change the 3-second rule, you certainly couldn't have beat him. If they didn't change the free throw rules, you wouldn't have beat him. So my question or my response to that is this: it's like the old adage, the apple on the stick in front of the horse. He's not gonna get a bite of that. He's gonna chase that apple all day long, but he's not gonna get a bite. So
Right.
the apple in this case were the rules. You change the rules to do what? To accommodate everybody else. So he's constantly adjusting and what? Evolving.
Right. Very good. Very good. Okay. What about the we'll throw this in there too. So a lot of people would say, okay, not enough teams were in the league. So I think he played in a time where it was like anywhere between 8 to 12 teams in the league
Okay.
in his heyday, right? And so
Okay.
what would you say to that, as opposed to someone today with 30 teams in their league, or even, and by the way, when Michael Jordan played, there was around, I believe it was around somewhere around in the 20s, somewhere in there. So even Jordan had the to play in the league when there was expansion going on, because they added the
Right.
Hornets, they added the
Right.
they added the Hornets, they added the Grizzlies, they added the Raptors, they added the Magic, and so
Hmm.
and so on and so on. So, what would you say about that time when Wilt was
Okay.
dominating, and there's not that many teams in the league? Does that make it tougher or easier?
I would submit to you that it's easier. Not for him, but for the league. On one hand, it's easy. On the other hand, it's difficult. So I'm trying to couch this correctly. So let's say I have 100,000 people from which to choose from to fill uh, what do we have? 12 men, 20
Yeah.
teams. 12 times
Maybe.
20 is what? Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, I got this big talent pool to fill a finite small number of people.
Right.
Still got a great talent pool. Still got all these colleges that I can go. Recruiting wasn't as refined as it is today. So you have a finite number of people from which to select from to fill in a finite number of teams. Today, the talent pool is watered down. Every team in the NBA has look at the people who sit on the bench and never get in the game under no set of circumstance. You got to have somebody almost decapitated to go down to the end of the bench. You know what they do? They hold towels and stand up and root. Look at every team in the NBA and tell me the name of the ninth man on any team in the NBA. I challenge you
Oh,
to do that.
yeah. We
I'll
challenge
ask
the
you right now.
listeners. We'll challenge the listeners on that one.
Okay, the ninth. Give me the name of the ninth man on any team in the NBA. You can't. You don't know him. Uh, that was not the norm in those days because if you got there, you had to have been great. They didn't have a lot of room for people to sit on the bench and not play.
Hmm.
Your team was comprised of 12 players. I think you had 13, 14 on the bench now. Look like 20 to me.
Yeah, it's a lot now, but yeah, I mean, when you think about it that way, now you're looking at okay, we talked about you mentioned Walt Bellamy, you mentioned Russ Unseld, Willis Reed, uh,
Yeah,
Bill Russell. I mean, these
yeah,
are Hall of Famers, right? Wilt
yes.
Chamberlain.
Think
So
about it. Yes.
so that's five Hall of Famers right there, and the league may have been 12 deep. So half of the league had Hall of Famers at center. And we haven't gotten into the what you mentioned, the Elgin Baylor. We haven't talked about Rick Barry yet. We haven't talked about Jerry West yet. We haven't talked about Cousy. We haven't talked about
Yeah.
Sam Jones. We can go on and on. And again, Hal Greer, Dave Bing. So a lot of these guys are playing against each other on a night in, night
And
out basis. So there's no stretch where you have like 3 weeks or 2 weeks with inferior
talent.
competition.
No, because they
Yes.
were all great in college. Dave Bing was All American. Hal Greer was All American. Just I, on the end of the bench, tell me you have an All American. A lot of times, you get a kid that's a local prodigy or a talent that's not that good, but people will come there. They'll get autographs from him because why? He's one of the neighborhood favorites. But then here's the next thing I challenge you. How many NBA players retire and destitute, don't have any money? Then I say to you, go back and look at those players from the 50s and 60s. See how many of them retired and destitute with no money. They invested, they were captains of industries. They being on a steel company.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you look at Will Chamberlain. Will Chamberlain didn't die broke. Bill Russell's not broke. Uh, uh, Walt Frazier's broke. Earl Monroe is a captain of industry who graduated from an HBCU. You just the people from the 50s and 60s understood the value of education, understanding how to spend your dollar, understanding that you can't spend $1 million on a chain when you got 2 million in the bank. I'll share this with you, and I know we're gonna get ready to lock this up.
Okay.
One of the funniest stories I've ever heard of anybody who understood money and they accused him of being broke. You want me to tell you who that is? Chad Ochocinco. You know he lived his first 2 years, never spent a paycheck. Do you know where he lived?
No, where?
In the
Did he stay at
stadium.
home?
No, he
No.
stayed in the stadium.
Wow. Okay.
You got to read that story. A
I
great
have
story.
to.
He said, yeah, he said, look, they had a cafeteria there, television, sofas.
Yeah,
He
that makes
said,
sense.
I ate like a king for 2 years. Then one day Marvin Lewis came and looked around and said, hey, where you live? He said, right here. He said, you got to get out of here. He said, you got to go get you an apartment or something. He said, for 2 years, I never spent any of my checks.
Well, that's a smart man.
But he says, everybody say I'm broke. Then he whipped out this checkbook. He said, if you can count them figures in there, by no means am I broke. He said, you won't see me driving these cars. You don't see me with these big chains. He said, I'm not spending my money like that. So that was a funny story. But anecdotally, I liked what Caldwell Jones said about Will Chamberlain.
Mm-hmm.
Caldwell came back to Georgia. You never read anything about Caldwell Jones being involved in any activities that he was broke or any of that. Because again, the old axiom, it takes a village. Those NBA players back then taught one another. And oh, by the way, they had to graduate from college to come to the NBA. There were no high school players. There were no. Well, I'm gonna do a year of college, then I'm going to the NBA. Those guys graduated with their degrees, and then they came to the NBA. Will Chamberlain was just like the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
These guys graduated college, and
Mm.
they had degrees of substance. They didn't have basket weaving degrees. So when you start talking about the greatest, I always say the greatest on the court has to be great off the court.
All right.
You can't you can't be great here and people look at you and you're over here with criminal activity. So I applaud Will Chamberlain for everything he's done. More importantly, I'm grateful for what he's given my eyes. Because like I said, I've seen Will Chamberlain on Sundays on, as my grandson would say, great TV.
Well, okay.
We didn't
Let me.
have
Well, we're gonna do this
okay,
real quick.
okay,
Okay. All right. We got about 3 or 4 minutes here. I want you to
okay.
give a player comparison of gentlemen, and I'm gonna throw the picture up, and I throw the name out there as well. But let's start with just give me a player comparison to Jerry West. Jerry West, somebody of that's a little bit younger can compare this gentleman right here to.
Uh, Westbrook,
Wow. Okay.
because he did everything: assist, score, steal. Today, I would say a Westbrook.
Okay. A Westbrook with a what type of shot?
Well, he didn't have the range Jerry West had,
Right.
but he could. Jerry West could rebound. He
Mm-hmm.
played defense. He could score. Westbrook could play defense. He could score and he could rebound.
Mm-hmm. But okay, so
Now,
what Jerry West with, let's say, is it Steph Curry jumper? Is it uh is
no,
it is it Jerry West? Is it Westbrook combined with the Ray Allen? Like who
no.
what part of the shooting comparison would Jerry West tie into?
Okay. So Jerry West had one heck of a jumper, and he could shoot it deep. But here's the key: where Steph Curry and Ray Allen shoot from, that's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
They're out by the logo hitting you with. You got to pick them up before they get to half court. Because Steph, the 29-foot hash mark is like a layup to Steph Curry
Mm-hmm.
and Ray Allen. Uh, it's more notable today because you had a three-pointer. But Jerry West shot deep, but it wasn't as noticeable. It was within the confines of the game, and you're looking at the floor as opposed to today. What we look at is we look at that circle,
Right. Right. That
and we
arc
know
right
that
there.
that's 3 points. So I don't have the vision acuity to say, they shot from the same distance. So my comparison to Westbrook is because they did a lot of things. So,
Okay.
what other player in the league does a lot of things good? So, I would say Westbrook.
Okay. All right. Rick Barry.
Ooh, man. Rick Barry. Oh, man. Let's see. All right. People going to hit me in the head for this one. Kobe.
Wow. Okay. Do tell.
Okay. Rick Barry was an assassin. He wasn't afraid of anybody. He could score on everybody, and he would cut your throat out in the last couple of seconds of. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say cut your throat out. Rick Barry would literally shoot you out of the gym in the waning seconds of a game to win it. Kobe. I don't like that killer mentality, but he had the bomber mentality.
Yes.
They played to win the game, but they were very proficient in what they did in their scoring ability. Uh, Rick Barry and Kobe.
Okay.
And I'm not a Kobe fan, by the way.
Wow. Okay. That's the only thing I'm disappointed in you about, Mr. Brown.
What? Why? You know what? I have come to and this is why I tell people I'm going to be honest. When Kobe
Yes,
was
sir.
playing, I was like, "Ooh, I don't particularly care for him," but it was all because of my vision of what I thought he was.
Hmm.
But over the years, he became more endearing to me. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is a dedicated father. He does great community, but what he didn't do is tell you what he did. So
Right.
I had to guess, and
Hmm.
my guesses sometimes interfere with the facts. So
Wow. But
I'm turning the corner on Kobe, but I ain't gonna tell you he's the greatest. I won't say
oh,
that.
well, I mean, I don't even think he's the greatest of all, one of the greatest of
Okay,
all time, because he
so
still
Rick
had.
Barry and
You
he.
can't if you can't top Michael Jordan, you know, like if a lot of people would say that Jordan's probably the best shooting guard of all time. So if you don't,
Not even close. Not even
well,
close.
right. So great player though, and I really do like Kobe.
Okay,
Oh,
all right.
let's go to this one though.
Okay,
Dave Bing.
today they being uh,
And it doesn't necessarily
cerebral.
have to be somebody right now, but just somebody,
No, I'm
80s
talking
and
about
up.
cerebral, smile,
Okay.
smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to compare, if I had to put Dave Being with a player, uh, man, that's hard. You just threw me one because man, Dave Being, I'm in my mind's eye, I'm traversing the entire league. Oh, Chris Paul.
Wow. Chris Paul. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Think about it. Assists, scoring. Can't foul him in the closing minutes of a game. So
That's
I
interesting.
would put
Okay.
I put those two together, Dave Bing and Chris Paul.
Okay. We hear this name every time we hear about the Sixers, um, and Wilt Chamberlain, and I believe that was the '67 championship team. But Hal Greer.
Hal Greer. Oh, was he something else? So who would I Hal Greer? The thing is that those guys played defense. So now I'm looking for a player of Hal. Oh, nah, he's been injured too much.
Oh,
Uh Hal Greer. Who would I compare Hal Greer to? Uh no. Uh, Derrick Rose would be good, but Derrick Rose was injured a lot.
mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, Derrick Rose was injured a lot, but him and Hal Greer, they're real gritty players. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't take any time off, and he played so hard that he injured himself a lot. Uh, Clay Thompson is another one, but he's injured a lot. Hal Greer didn't miss too many games, and he
Okay.
was a point guard. So I don't think that I can in my mind's eye see anyone that I could compare to Hal Greer. I don't.
Wow.
You
Okay.
set me one up there.
Well, do you have
Um,
Hal Greer as a two-way player? So you, because I heard you mention defense in
yes,
there too. So he's a two-way
yes,
player. Okay.
yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
And not only that, you have to have the respect of everybody on your team because you ran the team and what you said went. When you told them that was your shot and you told them don't take the shot, you know, they didn't take that shot because again, remember the nature of the point guard was he was the coach on the floor.
Okay.
He got everybody where they needed to be. He knew who had that shot. He saw the floor absolutely, and he got people where they need to be, and he got them the shot that they needed. So uh, I'm thinking about the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, the Charlotte Hornets, the Timberwolves. Can't give them Dame Leonard. Can't do that. You probably don't remember Gus Johnson, who
Okay.
played for the Seattle Supersonics,
Hmm.
and what was his running mate? Dennis Johnson. Dennis Johnson played for the Boston Celtics. You remember him, the point guard?
Right. He later on went to Boston, but he played with
Yes.
Seattle when they went to the finals, right? In the
Yes. And
70s.
they won a
Okay.
championship. So
Hmm.
now I would put them two together, but people probably don't know Dennis Johnson. You
Well,
see what I'm saying?
we'll bring him up when we talk about the 70s. How about that?
Okay, okay, but I would pair those two.
Okay.
All
Oh,
right.
that's an awesome comparison. All right, let's get to a couple of the let's just say more of the well-known players of that time. What about Oscar Robertson? Who would be your player comp for Oscar Robertson?
Magic.
Wow, okay, Magic Johnson. Yes, makes
Yeah,
sense. Big
yeah,
guard,
yes,
score, post, assist.
yeah,
It makes total sense there. Okay.
yeah.
Bill Russell, about a
Tim Duncan.
6'10, about a 6'10 center. Okay. So you say
Tim
Tim
Duncan.
Duncan. Okay, why you
Yeah.
say Duncan?
Because Russell and Duncan are both fundamentally sound. Didn't have a lot of fanfare to their game, but they just won.
Okay, that sums it up right there.
Huh? They just
That
won.
sums it up. Yeah.
Look at Tim Duncan when he played. A lot of people consider him a stiff. He had his moves, you couldn't foul him. So Bill Russell was the same thing. I think, in my mind's eye.
Okay. And they both play on the defensive end.
Yes,
So if there was an all NBA defense when Russell was playing, he would have been that for sure.
he'd have been that.
and
Certainly.
office and obviously he would have been all NBA first team and all that good stuff.
And
So
I'll tell you another thing, what you look at. Tim Duncan never blocked shots out of bounds. If he blocked to a place where he can go and get it.
very good.
Bill
Mhm.
Russell did the same thing. So that would be my comparison.
Okay. And also put in perspective, a lot of these guys that we're talking about, Walt Bellamy, 6'11. Uh um Will Chamberlain, 7'1", 7'2". Russell, 6'10". And a lot and all this, So if you go in today, let's fast forward to today. You know, Dwight Howard, he's 6'9". They measure the players in their actual heights now. So Howard's not even 6'10". So when we putting this into a total perspective, we got to think about that. Like when people say all these guys were, back then they were just playing against midgets and things like that, and short people, uh, 6'6" players. Um, that's not. You got to look at now. Dwight Howard 6'9". So if you're gonna say something about the players of yesteryear, you got to fast forward to today and say, hey,
Well,
where's the big man? Because look at Golden State. They don't have who's their big man right now
Weissman,
today.
but he's been injured. Today is
Exactly,
Weissman.
exactly.
And
But who do
Weissman
they
is
use now? They
a
use
Draymond Green.
who's probably 6'7" and a half,
Yeah,
6'8".
yeah, yeah. But he's strong. That's the thing
Yes,
people miss out on. He can sit down and put that forearm bar on you, and you can't just back him down in the paint
right. Okay,
unless you Jokovic from Denver.
right. True big there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Mr. Brown. I really appreciate you coming on. We're gonna talk again, and we're gonna
Okay.
get into some more detail. There's just not enough time to really, get all the way into all of these things, but we do have the opportunity to do several of these. So
Okay.
we can we can hash the 70s out next.
Okay, so I'll be much more prepared when I talk to you next time.
Mm, There
I
you
have to do some homework. I'll have
go.
some stuff for you. If you ask me a question, I'm gonna be able to cite some statistical data. I didn't
Okay.
know how much detail you wanted.
Oh, hey, look,
So
we just here. We're here to talk, and
yeah,
you're dropping knowledge, and that's the most
yeah.
important thing is that you're dropping knowledge. You're bringing things into perspective, and that's the whole purpose of what we're doing.
And the next time I'll stream this from my laptop.
Okay.
So I'm here, and I
Yes,
got to
sir.
tell you, thank you. I really enjoyed myself
Yes, sir.
because the nostalgia is what it is. I love basketball. I love it so much. I find myself watching little kids playing, But like I said initially, the reason I'm in love with the WNBA is the fundamentals. You watch the footwork, you watch the ball handling, you watch. Oh, it was absolutely brilliant to watch Chicago win the championship this year. Brilliant.
Yeah, it
I
was.
had. I didn't miss a game because I thought that. Think about Brittany Griner.
Yeah.
Was she 6'8", 6'9"?
hmm
Who's she playing against?
She's dominating her era.
There's nothing you can do about her either. And
All
so
right.
people gonna say 20 years from now, oh, she was 6'9". If
Yeah.
she'd have played against this girl today that's 6'11",
Yeah.
so I always tell people evolution.
That's right. That's right. Very good. But yes, we're
All
definitely
right.
going to. We have to talk about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the next one because we'll
Yeah.
be in that next decade and his dominance because his name comes up too when you talk about the greatest. So I look forward to that and
Okay.
definitely thank you for being on. And I thank
And I want
everybody
to
for
thank you
listening.
for allowing me this opportunity. Is absolutely. First of all, I want to commend you
Yes,
on
sir.
the job you did this evening. Thank you for allowing me to share what I've seen over the years in terms of basketball. And for those that are watching, hang in there.
Yes.
We'll be
Yes.
back.
Yes. Oh,
All
absolutely.
right.
More to come. More to come.
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Brown, and we thank
Thank you,
everybody
sir.
for watching. Have a great
All
night,
right.
everyone.
Take care.
See you.